shaded part there, that is where the Philippines is at in terms of mathematics. So this graph shows how the Philippines fare against 80 other participating countries and economies in PISA 2022. So we'll see the Philippines as 76th out of 81 countries in mathematics. 5 education systems are below our average: Guatemala, El Salvador, Dominican Republic, Paraguay, and Cambodia. And 2 are at par with our performance: Panama and Kosovo. How does the Philippines fare in mathematics? Let's take a closer look. The OECD average is at level 2. So you see the peach shaded part there, that's level 2. That's, the score is 472. At a minimum, students at this level can interpret and recognize without direct instructions how a simple situation can be represented mathematically. The Philippines average is at level 1B. Okay. At a minimum, students at this level can respond to questions involving easy to understand context, which are clearly given in a simple representation. I'll give you a sample item from PISA. So this is a sample of a level 2 item in math. In this item, students are asked to compute the percentage of blue triangles based on 5 rows of the pattern. Since the 5th row is not shown, students have to extend the pattern by 1 row to determine new values for the number of blue triangles and the total number of triangles. With 5 rows, the percentage of blue triangles is 40%. This item is intended to be easy and to get students thinking about extending the pattern beyond what is shown, but not extending the pattern so that it requires generalizing. A typical student from OECD countries has a higher chance of responding correctly to this item compared to a typical Filipino student. That's the minimum. This one is, the next example is a level 5 example. In this item, the task for the students is to evaluate a claim that the percentage of blue triangles in the pattern will always be less than 50% as more rows are added. Students have to select either yes or no to indicate if the claim is or is not true. But they also have to provide an explanation to support their selection. This is a reasoning item that requires students to analyze the pattern to recognize a relationship between the number of red and the number of blue triangles in each row, and then use that relationship to support their selection. Given our average scores in math, a typical Filipino student would find this item very difficult, and his or her chance of responding to this correctly would be quite low. Let's look at reading this time. How does the Philippines fare in reading? The OECD average, which is 476 score points, is at level 2. At a minimum, students at level 2 can identify the main idea in a text of moderate length, find information based on explicit, though sometimes complex criteria, and can reflect on the purpose and form of text when explicitly directed to do so. The Philippines average is at level 1A. At a minimum, students at level 1A can understand literal meaning of sentences or short passages, locate information within short text, and can reflect on the purpose and relative importance of information in simple texts. Let's now look at our science scores. How does the Philippines fare in science? In science, the OECD average is at level 3, 485 score points. At a minimum, students at level 3 can use moderately complex knowledge to explain familiar scientific phenomena and can use procedural or epistemic knowledge to carry out a simple experiment in a constrained context. The Philippine average is at level 1A. At a minimum, these students can use basic knowledge to identify correct explanations for simple scientific phenomena, and with support, these students can undertake scientific investigations with no more than 2 variables. The next slide will show us how the Philippines compare in 2022 to 2018. So there's a bit of good news here. The performance of 15-year-old students in the Philippines in the 3 subject domains remained stable despite the COVID-19 pandemic. In mathematics, there are 2 score points improvement. In reading, there are 7 score points improvement. But in science, there's a drop of 1 point. Okay? While there is an improvement in terms of scores, they are not statistically significant. The levels remain. Okay? So we have not moved out of the levels. But what proportion of students, of Filipino students, achieve the minimum proficiency? Let's look at some good news. So not all Filipino students were not able to achieve the minimum. There were students that were able to achieve the minimum proficiency. There is 16% in mathematics, 24% in reading, 23% in science. So there's hope because we see a percentage of our students reaching the minimum level of proficiency. But we have to work on the more than 75% of our students in the Philippines who are below the minimum level of proficiency in mathematics, science, and reading. This time, allow me to show you the region's performance in PISA 2022. NCR and Region 4A achieved average scores that were statistically higher than the national average in all 3 subjects. Yay! Congratulations, RD Willie, RD Joyce, now USEC Willie. Region 10 in reading and math and Region 9 in math scored statistically lower than the national average. The scores of the remaining regions in all other domains were statistically the same as the national average. So when we look at the average of NCR and 4A in mathematics, their average is 1 proficiency level higher than the national average. NCR and Region 4A are at level 1A. The national average is at level 1B. Now let's compare the regional performance in 2018 and in 2022. So compared to 2018, there was no significant change in the performance of all the regions. The next slide will show us the proportion of students in each region that has achieved the minimum proficiency in mathematics. So again, let's look at this as some good news for us. We have students in regions that are able to achieve the minimum proficiency level, minimum and above. So NCR, CAR, and Region 4A have the largest shares of students who have reached the minimum level of proficiency in reading, science, and math. And in NCR, some 1% of our students reached level 5 in mathematics. So it's like a Singapore performance, level 5 in mathematics. Okay? So there are good news. Parang medyo nakakahinga tayo kapag nakakarinig, kahit na bit of good news. But of course, we cannot forget the 75 to 80% of our students that need help. Now let's look at the proportion of students in each region that has achieved the minimum proficiency in reading. So again, NCR, CAR, and Region 4A are consistent. NCR, CAR, and Region 4A have the largest share of students who have reached the minimum level of proficiency in reading, science, and math. Almost half of students in NCR and 2 in every 5 students in CAR achieved at least the minimum proficiency in reading. Okay, so again, that's a bit of good news. But when you look at the graph, you see some students achieving level 6 and level 5. We need to know what they are doing or what their schools are doing or what their teachers are doing, why they are able to achieve level 6, 5, and 4. Now let's look at contextual variables. There's another one, which is science. Okay, so this is achievement in science. Same regions, NCR, CAR, and Region 4A have the largest shares of students who have reached the minimum level of proficiency in reading, science, and math. At least 2 in every 5 students in NCR and CAR achieved level 2 or above in science. In NCR, some 1% reached level 5. So may pag-asa po tayo. We're hopeful. Okay? That 1% will need to become okay. Next is, I'll talk about contextual variables that contribute to performance outcomes. So performance gap within the Philippines in terms of socio-economic differences. Students from socio-economically advantaged homes, we know this already, scored better than their disadvantaged peers in math, reading, and science. There's a huge score difference, especially in reading and science. So mathematics, 36 score points, reading, 52 score points, science, 51 score point difference. But there's a bit of good news here. Some 12% of disadvantaged students in the Philippines were able to score in the top quarter of mathematics performance in the country. Okay, let's look at gender this time. Girls, as expected, as usual, girls outperform. Okay, I need to say this in a matter-of-fact way. Girls outperformed boys in all 3 domains of assessments. The average scores of girls in math and reading were in level 1A, while boys are at level 1B. Both boys and girls were at level 1A in science. But comparing the 2022 results with 2018, there was no significant change in the performance between boys and girls in math and science. And in reading, the difference decreased by 8 score points. This time, let's look at the performance of private schools versus public schools. Students attending private schools scored higher than those in the public schools. Students in the private schools were at level 1A in math and science, while public school students were at level 1B. In reading, students in private schools were at level 2, while students in the public schools were at level 1B. You'll see the scores in the table at the right side. So the score differences are huge. At this point, let me talk about well-being and investments for education. This is a snapshot of how learning continued in the Philippines during the pandemic, describing how schools and students responded to the educational disruptions and its effect on students' learning and well-being. I will also cover how investments in education are related. How investments in education are related to student performance and well-being. Let's look at students' sense of belonging at school and satisfaction with life. Compared to 2018, students' sense of belonging at school declined in the Philippines. Similar to many countries and economies, student satisfaction with life declined in the Philippines, and 70% reported that they were not satisfied with their lives. The next slide shows us learning during COVID-19 pandemic. Students in the Philippines reported varying experiences with remote learning, but they generally reported a more positive experience with learning at home in comparison to the OECD countries on average. Okay? That's a bit of good news. And what contributes to the positive experience of learners during the COVID-19 disruption? When we look at the graph here, you have 83% of students responding that their teachers were well prepared to provide instruction remotely, and I improved my skills in using digital devices for learning purposes. So the positive experience can be attributed to teacher support and digital resources. Okay, the next slide is on, again, a continuation of learning during the pandemic. During remote learning, students in the Philippines encountered challenges, more so among girls compared to their counterparts from OECD countries. Although these challenges were not associated with a decrease in math scores. So when you look at the challenges that were reported here, 2% said that they had problems with motivating themselves to do schoolwork. And 41% said they had problems with understanding their school assignments. Let's look at the use of digital devices. 15-year-olds in the Philippines spend approximately a total of 10.7 hours per day on digital resources, whether for learning activities, which is 6 hours, or leisure, 4.7 hours. We see the comparison of time spent on digital resources per day on the table at the right side. A 1-hour increase in the time spent per day on digital devices for learning at school had increased mathematics score by 3 points, but decreased by 4 points when used for leisure. So digital devices used for learning, there is an increase in performance. Digital devices used for leisure decreased by 4 points. The next slide shows us the language at home. Only 7% of our students who participated in PISA reported that they speak English at home most of the time. In PISA 2022, students who speak English at home most of the time scored significantly lower than those who speak a language other than English in all assessment domains. Both groups, however, we're talking about an increase in score points, but not an increase in level, so the same level of proficiency for both groups. Performance differences based on language at home were not observed in 2018. The next slide shows us the teacher support in math classes. The level of support provided by teachers to their students in the Philippines was higher, significantly higher, than the OECD countries on average. Students who were attending classes with supportive teacher in most or every mathematics lesson scored from 17 to 27 points higher than those who received lesser support. Okay? This shows us the power of good teaching, okay, or good teachers. Let's look at disciplinary climate in math classes. There seems to be a need for our math teachers to improve their classroom management skills. A considerable proportion of students reported that they study mathematics in a disciplinary climate that is not favorable to learning. So when we look at the graph here, 41% of our students are distracted by using digital devices. 38% get distracted by other students who are using digital devices. 34%, this is on classroom management, the teacher has to wait a long time for students to quiet down. 30%, students do not start working for a long time after the lesson begins. And then 30%, I'm looking at the second from the bottom, there is noise and disorder in their classrooms. Let's look at safety at this point, feeling safe at and around school. The index of feeling safe at school was relatively low in the Philippines compared to the OECD countries on average. And the feeling of being unsafe was more common among girls than boys. For each unit increase in the index of feeling safe at school, there was a 9-point increase in students' performance in mathematics after accounting for socioeconomic profiles of both students and schools. Okay, so 19% of our students said, I feel safe at other places at school. So that's just 19%. I feel safe in my classrooms at school. That's a small 8%. I feel safe on my way home from school. That's 10%. I feel safe on my way to school. That's only 8%. Related to this is bullying. The incidence of bullying in schools in the Philippines had decreased between 2022 and 2018. However, it remained a pervasive problem, more so among boys and those in public schools. Okay? Maybe because they were not in their classrooms, that's why they were not bullied. Okay? But almost 1 in every 3 students reported experiencing bullying at school at least once a week. Students who experienced bullying at least a few times a month scored 11 to 44 points lower in mathematics. Okay? The next one is student truancy. When we speak of student truancy, this is about how many times students had skipped classes or days of schools 2 weeks prior to the PISA test. So at least 1 in every 4 students reported having skipped at least 1 class or day in school, with a higher prevalence among socio-economically advantaged students, boys, and those attending public schools. Students who reported having skipped at least a class or day of school scored 25 points lower in mathematics. The next slide is on long-term absenteeism. So long-term absenteeism is defined as having missed school for more than 3 months in a row. The incidence of long-term absenteeism in the Philippines was almost 4 times higher than the OECD countries on average. It was more commonly reported among boys and students in the public schools. And these are the reasons. At the right side, we see the reasons why students miss schools. I had to take care of a family member, that's 59%. I had to help with work at home, the family business, that is 53%. I was bored, that's 45%. School was closed because of a natural disaster, that is 44%. So family situations, being bored, and school closures remained as the primary reasons for long-term absenteeism. Let's look at grade repetition. 1 in every 4 students repeated a grade at least once, more so among boys and those in public schools. They were the ones who were truant, low achievers, bullied, and had a low sense of belonging at school. And students who reported a grade, students who repeated a grade at least once in elementary or secondary school scored lower by 53 and 57 points in mathematics. Let's go now to student-teacher ratio and class size. The average student-teacher ratio in the Philippines increased from 26 in 2018 to 30 in 2022. This was higher than the OECD average of 12. Similar to 2018, the average class size in the Philippines was 43, which is higher than the OECD average, which is 26. Both the student-teacher ratio and class size was higher in public schools than in private schools in the Philippines. So 28 in public for average student-teacher ratio, private is 22 for class size, 43 in public for private, that is 40. Education systems that reported lower student-teacher ratios and smaller class size generally showed higher mathematics scores. Let's now move to parental involvement in school-related activities. So similar with 2018, parental involvement in school-related activities was still high in the Philippines compared to OECD countries on average. So we have principals reporting that at least half of all families are involved in school-related activities. And some of those here, 92% participated in local school government, 83% discussed their child's progress on the initiative of one of their child's teachers. Next is parental support. So it seems that parental involvement is different from parental support. So there are descriptions on parental support given at the table here. Students in more supportive homes were more likely to perform better in mathematics. 1 unit increase in the index of family support in the Philippines was associated with a 13-point increase in the mathematics score of students after accounting for their socioeconomic profile and their school socioeconomic profile. So these are the activities that show family support. At 44%, eat the main meal with you, the family eating meals together. At 33%, spend time just talking with you. At 28%, encourage you to get good marks. 21% talk to you about the importance of completing upper secondary. Okay. Like 18% at the top here, ask what you did in school that day. The next slide will show us something about shortage of educational staff. The percentage of students in the Philippines that were in schools whose principal reported that the school's capacity to provide instruction is hindered by a lack of teaching staff and by inadequate or poorly qualified teaching staff had increased between 2018 and 2022. In 2018, the corresponding proportions were 19% and 8%. A 1-unit increase in the index of shortage of education staff resulted in a decrease in math score by 6 score points before accounting for the students and schools' socio-economic profiles. So this is based on the report of principals. So 43% of them reported a lack of teaching staff, 32% a lack of assisting staff, inadequate or poorly qualified teaching staff, 22% inadequate or poorly qualified, should be 19% inadequate or poorly qualified teaching staff, 19%. Let's look at shortage of educational materials and its effect on performance. The index of shortage of educational material in the Philippines was relatively high compared to the OECD countries on average. At least half of the students were in schools whose principal reported that the school's capacity to provide instruction is hindered by a lack of educational materials or inadequate or poor educational materials. A 1-unit increase in the index of shortage of educational material resulted to a decrease in mathematics performance by 4 score points. At this point, let's look at teacher qualifications. We have a high number of fully certified teachers in the Philippines. That means in the Philippines, these are licensed teachers because certification is different across countries in the world. In the Philippines, it is via the licensure examination for teachers. So the number of fully certified teachers in the Philippines was higher in the Philippines than in OECD countries. But OECD countries on average had more teachers with specialized education. And they possess post-baccalaureate degrees or master's degrees. Okay, now let's look at attendance to the pre-primary education. While the majority of Filipino students, specifically girls, students from advantaged backgrounds and students from private schools reported having attended pre-primary education for at least 1 year, the percentage of those who had not attended increased between 2018 and 2022. Okay? And that is most likely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Students who attended pre-primary education for at least 1 year but less than 2 years scored 26 points higher than those who did not attend or attended for less than a year. Next one is on food security. 12% of our students reported that they came to school without eating every day or almost every day. These are our 15-year-old students. 12% reported that they have not eaten every day or almost every day. They eat 4 to 5 times a week, 3%, 2 to 3 times a week, 9%, about once a week, 15%. Food insecurity was found to be associated with mathematics performance. So pag gutom ang bata, mababa ang performance sa math. Education spending. This is the last on contextual variables. So when you look at the graph here, the average spending per student in the Philippines is 9 times lower than that across OECD countries. Okay. So that suggests that countries, developing countries such as the Philippines, are often under-resourced. That ends the contextual variable presentations. My next slide is on policy and practice options. Considering the findings in PISA 2022, there are some policy and practice options that we're sharing with you. On learning outcomes, provide sufficient support for high-quality teaching and learning by increasing teacher capacity so they can better support students. Engage parents as educational allies by encouraging at-home parental support to reinforce student learning. For well-being, create a safe, inclusive, supportive, and connected school climate. Implement and enforce consistent and comprehensive truancy tracking policy and procedures to ensure that school-age children are in schools. Equity, ensure that adequate learning resources are made available, accessible, and equitable, especially for those vulnerable and disadvantaged children. And investments for education success, protect education spending, and increase investment in education to meet the pressing demands in our education system. So before I end, I just would like to emphasize that there are reforms that DepEd is currently undertaking, and they are in the banner of our Matatag education agenda. We have the National Learning Recovery Program. We're pilot implementing the Matatag curriculum. We're strengthening the professional development of teachers and their career progression, and we're removing non-teaching tasks, among others. To end, education is not just the business of the Department of Education. To be successful, to improve learning outcomes, to improve our performance, there has to be a multi-sectoral approach. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Yusek Gono, for presenting the salient findings of the Philippines in PISA 2022. To deliver a call to action concerning the PISA findings and the next steps for our education system, let us all listen to the message of the Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines and the Secretary of the Department of Education, Honorable Sara Z. Duterte.
Assalamualaikum. Madayaw ug maayong adlaw kaninyong tanan. Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Today, we come together to address the state of education in the Philippines as reflected by the recent results of the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. PISA has provided us with valuable insights into the strengths and weaknesses of our education system. The PISA results lay bare uncomfortable truth. It has shown that a significant majority of our boys and girls fall below the proficiency level required for full participation in society and contributing to nation building. The PISA results are not merely a reflection of our education system, it is a mirror reflecting our collective efforts, investments, and most importantly, our commitment to education and the future we envision for our children. As such, this is a call to action, a call to our collective responsibility as a nation. The Department of Education has started to take significant strides forward to address the issues on learning among Filipino children. We have introduced the Matatag curriculum, implemented the national reading, math, and science programs, initiated the Catch-up Fridays for learners and teachers, expanded the teacher career progression, pushed for transparent educational programs and practices, and started digitalization among our schools. But we still need your support. We need every stakeholder to join us in this journey moving forward. We may approach the solution differently, but we all agree on the destination. Everyone's efforts are counted and everyone is accountable for our children's future. As a mother, I understand the transformative power of parental support we provide to our children. The PISA results emphasize this. The kind of support we provide to our children's learning can make a significant difference in their success. To our dedicated teachers, your relentless efforts have not gone unnoticed. Despite the challenges of school closures during the pandemic, our children speak of your unwavering support, making their remote learning experiences more positive. Education leaders, let us support our teachers so they can continue to support our children. Teacher training institutions, your role is pivotal. We need teachers who are not only intelligent, but also passionate and compassionate. Your preparation of empowered and passionate educators is crucial for the future. Our schools and communities can contribute to creating a safe, inclusive, supportive, and connected school climate. We must act to bring back our school-aged children and prevent long-term absenteeism, protecting them from exploitation due to their socio-economic conditions. To our education partners and stakeholders, together we will find ways to perform better despite the limited resources. Other educational systems have done it, and so can we. With your help, we aim to ensure equitable access to learning resources, especially for our vulnerable and disadvantaged children. In closing, I call on everyone to pool our efforts together to build a more resilient, matatag education system. An education system that aims to improve learning outcomes, prioritizes student and teacher well-being, and promote accountability to close remaining disparities. Patuloy tayong maging matatag sa pagtaguyod ng isang bansang makabata at mga batang makabansa. Ang lahat ng ginagawa natin ay para sa Diyos, sa bayan, at sa pamilyang Pilipino. Syukran.
Thank you, Vice President and Secretary, Honorable Sara Z. Duterte. We are honored to have the presence of the chairperson of the Committee on Basic Education in the Senate. Please join me in welcoming Senator Sherwin T. Gatchalian as she shares his expression of support for the Department of Education.
Morning everyone. Gandang umaga po sa lahat. First of all, foremost, let me greet our good Vice President, the Secretary of the Department of Education, Secretary Sara Duterte, who's ably represented by Yusek Poa and the rest of the Undersecretary, Dr. Gina, Yusek Gina is also here. Let me also greet my partner, the host district for today, Congressman Romanito. And let me also greet all the education stakeholders, all the education champions who are here with us today. There's so much to talk about after the presentation of Yusek Gina, but first let me congratulate DepEd for taking the plunge in taking PISA. Full disclosure, when I was talking to Yusek Dads and Yusek Maluluan, full disclosure, I was the minority who was not in agreement to take the PISA in 2022, because in my analysis, reforms take time, and we all know what will happen, what the results will happen if we don't fully implement the reforms. But I'm very happy that I was overruled and DepEd took the PISA, and that's important to also look at the trends and look at the other variables that we can touch and we can reform in order to improve learner outcomes. So I just want to say a few things. No? First, the good news. Despite the pandemic, despite the struggles in pursuing learning and teaching in our schools, we did not regress. No? That's one piece of good news, because in my own, actually I was really concerned that we might regress, because I've seen on the ground the struggles of our teachers and principals in continuing with opening our schools and also continuing teaching our students despite the technological limitations and also a lot of limitations on the ground. Another piece of good news, I think, and I was talking to Dr. Bienviaje, that it seems to me that we have bottomed out already. No? In the parlance of finance, we've already hit the bottom. So I think there's no way for us but to go up. No? So I expect that later on we'll be seeing improvements in our scores. Of course, the bad news is we have stagnated. No? Statistically, even though we've seen a little bit of improvement, statistically it's insignificant, meaning we have stagnated, and that's a concern for us. So just to move forward, and this is some of the things that I have in mind and some suggestions. We have to intensify our learning recovery in the next few years. I think it's important to invest in learning recovery. We estimated that we need approximately about 10 billion pesos to really roll out an intensified learning recovery in all of our almost 40,000+ schools. And it's important that we finance the learning recovery in our schools, not only using their MOE, but really supporting them with materials, with financing in order for our schools and our principals to roll out learning recovery. In the 2024 budget, I've seen that that DepEd program close to about 2.9 billion in terms of learning recovery. So we still need to source about 7 billion to fully intensify the learning recovery. And that's, we need to work together to look for external financing. I see a lot of our external financiers here, our education partners. But on top of that, I'm also looking for other sources within the General Appropriations Act. No? For example, the contingency funds of the different departments, especially the Office of the President. We might, I think together we can convince the Office of the President to plow in more funds in order to intensify our learning recovery. Just to give you some perspective, when the pandemic hit the country bought close to about 100 billion pesos in terms of vaccines, because we treated the pandemic as urgent and something that we need to get ourselves out of. What's happening right now to us, we have to treat it the same. Meaning we have to spend a lot of funds in order to intensify our programs so that we can get ourselves out of this education crisis. So it's important to spend a lot of funds in order to intensify our programs. So to end, let me express my full support. Let me express my unwavering support to the Department of Education. I know that you have already started major reforms such as the curriculum, the Matatag curriculum that is being rolled out. There are other things that we can still implement and push. For example, the Excellence in Teacher Education Law, which Congressman Roman and I worked very hard, and also Dr. Jeannie Hoxon worked very hard to put this together. That's a low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, that we should activate in order to further push for reforms. But I would like to, again, express my full support to DepEd's ongoing reforms. Let's not be discouraged with the results, because what's encouraging is we know the problem, we acknowledge the problem, and we are doing something to address this issue. And I've seen that we're already putting the building blocks in order to improve learner outcomes, hopefully in the next few PISAs or the next few large-scale assessments. So again, you have my support, and let's work together in order to improve learner outcomes and to improve our education system. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian, for your support to the Department of Education. We are also honored to be joined by the chairperson of the Committee on Basic Education in the Congress. Let us all welcome Congressman Romanito T Romo as he delivers his message of support to the department.
Well, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat, kay Vice President Sara, Secretary of Education, sa buong DepEd family po natin, kay Senator Sherwin Gatchalian and the whole Senate Education Committee staff who also worked so hard even during the pandemic po, and all other education stakeholders present here this morning. Alam po ninyo, sa totoo lang, it's always a matter of perspective. When I was advised yesterday that the results would come out, and then the results were forwarded to me immediately, binasa ko naman po yung graphs. In fact, I did not need what Yusek Gina was mentioning because I read the graphs. And based on my perspective, in fact, hindi ba dapat natutuwa tayo ngayon? Hindi ba we should be celebrating? Bakit? Una, nabanggit na ng lahat, may pandemic. Pangalawa, please Google or take a look. Lahat na lang ng survey firms, lahat na may opinion, lahat ng gumawa ng studies, lahat sinabi, kawawa ang Pilipinas, longest lockdown ang mangyayari dyan, yung learning loss nila, napakalaki. Tama po yun. May nagsabi sa akin, sa isang text sa akin kanina umaga, hindi, Congressman, yung learning loss, yung re-refer niya doon, learning loss nung yung CPLM exam, yung grades 1 to 3. But reading comprehension is age appropriate. Meaning, kung naapektuhan yung 10-year-old, dapat naapektuhan yung 15 years old. We held the line. During the pandemic, when classes were practically online, many students did not have technology. Many did not even know how to use technology. We held the line. With the exception of science, insignificant as some people may want to portray it, there was an increase in reading comprehension, there was an increase in mathematics, science, insignificant yung pagbabawas doon. So again, dapat nga natutuwa tayo, we held the line compared to other countries. The sacrifices of the teaching and non-teaching personnel during the pandemic. Sinabi natin sa teaching and non-teaching personnel noon, huwag kayong pumasok. Hindi natin alam kung anong pandemic. But March 2020, when we declared walang pwedeng pumasok, walang pwedeng lumabas ng bahay, except, of course, in doctors, nurses, our teaching and non-teaching personnel, they went to the schools. DepEd family, nandito rin ang DepEd family. They went to this main office. Pero despite all the efforts, lahat ng ginawa, batikos kaliwa, batikos kanan, lahat na lang parang hindi tama. But this results proves that the DepEd, the education stakeholders, held the line during the time, and here we are now. As Senator Sherwin said, we can now look forward because reforms, which, ano pa po ba yung reform na na-institute after the first PISA test? There was only one reform. Diba? You said that reform was reducing the number of competencies from 15,000 plus to a little more than 5,000. That was what the most essential learning competencies. Yan yung ginawa ni Secretary Briones at that time. Binatikos pa nga siya nun eh. Pero we see, it works now. But now, we have a matatag curriculum, we have catch-up Fridays, and we have many reforms in the pipeline. Everything is looking up. So we have all the reasons to smile and to be confident that we are on our way towards that right direction. Ang kailangan lang, tulong-tulong, we become critics of one another, but at the end of the day, sabi nga, isa lang naman ang sabi ni VP Sara kanina, isa lang naman ang patutunguhan natin lahat eh. We want quality education and we have proven we can do it. Mabuhay po education sa Pilipinas, mabuhay po ang Pilipinas.
Thank you, Congressman Romulo, for the inspiration and for expressing your support to the call to action of the Department of Education. May we request Senator Gatchalian and Congressman Romulo, together with Undersecretary POA and DepEd Execom members, Yusek Gina Gonong, Assistant Secretaries Alma Ruby Torrio and Assistant Secretary Almeida and Director Benito, to be on stage and stand proud for a photo session. May I also request our participants to stand with our guests for the proud shot. Thank you. Before we move into the next segment of this forum, let us take a 15-minute break, refresh and recharge as we have more enriching discussions ahead. Reminders for our friends from the media. We will have the press conference after the part 2 of this forum. Thank you very much.
Lahat tayo nagsisikap.
Lahat tayo nagsisipag.
Lahat tayo nais kumalina't gumaling.
Lahat tayo gustong makatulong sa pamilya at sa bayan.
Lahat tayo maaasahan.
Lahat tayo gagawa.
Lahat tayo tutulong.
Lahat tayo didiskarte at dilikha para sa ating kinabukasan.
Dahil lahat tayo ay may pangarap, may gustong abutin, may nais marating.
At kahit pa humarap sa libu-libong hamon ng buhay,
Ang tatag ng lahing Pilipino,
Mangingibabaw.
susulong.
Tayo ay magiging matatag.
Matatag na kurikulum,
Matatag na paaralan at agarang serbisyo para sa edukasyon.
matatag na programa sa mag-aaral at kabataan.
matatag na suporta para sa mga guro.
Ang ating pangarap,
maaabot.
mararating,
Basta tulong-tulong.
magsisipag tayo
Magsisikap tayo.
para sa isang bansang makabata.
Batang makabansa.
Lahat tayo.
Lahat tayo.
Lahat tayo. Matatag ang pangarap, matatag ang kinabukasan.
Check. Check, check. Check, check. Check.
Yes, ma'am. Dali niyo po yung ano. Wala, naka-Julie.
Please settle down now. We are about to begin the next segment of this forum. Thank you. Once again, please settle down now. We are about to begin the next segment of this forum. Thank you. Once again, please settle down now. We are about to begin the next segment of this forum. Thank you. We now move to another segment of this forum, which is the panel discussion. One of the main goals of this forum is not just to understand the numbers presented in the PISA results, but to collectively work towards improving the quality of education in our country. The insights we will gain from today's discussions will play a crucial role in shaping policies, practices, and initiatives that will positively impact the future of our learners. The first set of panel discussion will focus on learning and well-being, covering topics about Filipino students' performance in the different domains of assessment in PISA. The discussion will also include home and school factors that may influence students' performance, including performance gaps between groups of students that could inform equity and well-being. Joining us are our invited esteemed panel of discussants. Undersecretary Wilfredo E. Cabral of DepEd's Human Resource and Organizational Development. Dr. Diosdado M. San Antonio, a former Undersecretary of the Department of Education and currently the Manager of Education Research and Innovation Office at Simeo Inotec. Mr. Xerxes De Castro, the Basic Education Advisor of the Save the Children Philippines. Ms. Justine Raagas, the Executive Director of the Philippine Business for Education. And Mr. Edgar R. Dorana, a Master Teacher and a Metrobank Foundation Outstanding Filipinos 2023 awardee. Moderating this panel discussion is Assistant Secretary Dexter A. Galban.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our forum on PISA 2022. And this is the first of two panels today. I am Assistant Secretary Dexter Galvan, and I'll be moderating this session. And we are focusing first on learning and well-being. And we're very thankful that we have a wonderful and esteemed array of panelists joining us. As mentioned, we have Yusek Willie Cabral, we have Dr. Diosdado San Antonio, we have Mr. Xerxes De Castro, Ms. Marie Justine Raagas, and of course, Mr. Edgar Dorana. Let's give them a round of applause and start this panel on a very high note, because we have all seen the results of PISA 2022 as duly presented by our Yusek G. Nagono. And here, we hope to provide an avenue for discussion and probably a way for us to look into it deeper from various perspectives: business, government, NGO, civil society. And with that being said, we want to look into that dynamic, the external analysis and the internal protocols and goals that we will undertake to improve learner well-being and performance. So to begin, perhaps I can raise the first question for this panel, which is, what do the PISA results suggest about the robustness and resilience of our education system? In turn, what lessons can we learn from PISA to better improve our education system's resilience in future educational disruptions such as COVID-19 and the like? And perhaps to begin, it might be strategic to look at it from an external lens, but at the same time, perhaps a reference to the previous administration's efforts also. So perhaps we can start with Yusek Dad, San Antonio, regarding your thoughts on the matter.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Asek Dexter. Of course, we have to acknowledge that the decision to take PISA 2022 was made by the team of Ma'am Liling. And I personally would like to acknowledge that our main strategist is Secretary Liling, ably supported by an equally able USEC Chief of Staff then, Nepo. You were the one on top in terms of implementing the strategy we had to do to do better in PISA 2022. And apparently the effort, although we were constrained in terms of time because the time to implement the little intervention we designed was very short, but it appears that the effort has paid off. So in terms of resilience, I have realized this one I've been saying in public fora during my stint as USEC. The Filipinos made sure that bayanihan was at work during COVID-19. So even in spite of so many reservations from many sectors, I never wavered in my belief that we would prevail because the sectors, all sectors of the Philippine society were supporting us. When I visited schools to check on what's happening, even if we did not have face-to-face classes, we knew and I was able to monitor a lot of interventions implemented by our principals on the ground, the superintendents, the regional directors. So we can really claim that if we sustain bayanihan in DepEd, we will continue to demonstrate high level of resilience, and we will prove our naysayers wrong in their expectations that learning loss would be so grave during the time that we were not operating the schools on a face-to-face mode, but still we were able to come up with something that will allow learners to go through all the experiences for them to continue to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yusek Dads. And I think that provides us already the foundation for this discussion. The highlight of DepEd, the education system showing resilience. And I believe that harkens back to our goal of being matatag. And maybe to explore this further, one of the things we can look into would be the feedback and analysis of our business in education partners, particularly those that are helping us bridge the public and private sector. So perhaps we can call on our dear friend from the private sector, Ma'am Ragas. Any feedback on the PISA 2022 result?
Thanks, ASEC Dex. So essentially, it's good, and we laud the government for participating in PISA 2022, even though it's only been 3 years since the last one, right? And reforms really take a long time. But it was important to kind of check where we are at, considering that there was a complete global upheaval with the pandemic. While we did move up a couple of scores, but the movement is really statistically insignificant, right? It's very small. It might be a cause to partially celebrate, right? Or at least pat ourselves on the back na, hey, we didn't regress, but we need to keep in mind, and at least from our end, we should not forget that even before these scores came out, and now that we are still, it's still status quo, we haven't moved. We are still, and we have been for the longest time, in a learning crisis. And if I may say so, even a humanitarian crisis, if you think about it, because if we don't move the needle, and if we don't make sure that all these reforms that have been planned are put in place and really happen, we're condemning all our learners to lives of poor economic outcomes in the future once they become adults and become members of society. So I guess from our perspective, it's just something that we shouldn't forget, that we are still below the minimum standards, and we still need to continue moving forward and move forward fast.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a wonderful way to look into it, that there is cause to celebrate, that despite the pandemic, we're able to, as mentioned earlier by our beloved partners in Congress, there was capability to hold the line. But hearkening back, there is still a lot of work to be done. And we'd like to thank our business and private sector partners in helping us make that happen. But of course, they're not our only partners in development. Of course, we have to reach out to our dear allies within the CSO and NGO sector. And in that effect, I'd love to know the thoughts and feedback of our friends from Save the Children. So may call on Mr. Xerxes de Castro for your feedback, sir.
Thank you, Asek Dexter. Siguro yun yung natutuwa kami as civil society organizations, NGOs na naririnig when we attend this kind of forum na education is not just a business of the Department of Education. So we value that partnership, and I think ang makikita natin sa results ay yun nga, we were able to improve a bit in math and reading. But nung binabasa ko yung result as at Dexter, ang nakita ko is 20-point scores mean 1 year's worth of learning opportunity. So if our average is 350 and the OECD average is around 450, that means 5 years worth of delay. I can't find the right words, pero that means we have a lot of work to do. So that means continue yung mga reforms. So kanina nabanggit ni Yusek Gina our National Learning Recovery Program, and we're happy as CSOs, NGOs to really do our own catch-up programs where we see really important, significant progress in terms of reading and other learning areas. So I think that's what's important, that we keep working together and we commit to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that's something that we can definitely consider. We have to look into the reasons why our scores are that way. And as presented a while ago by Yusek Gina, there are quite a lot of things that we can focus on. For example, a decrease in bullying can potentially improve our scores by 11 to 44 points. And an increase in the feeling of safety within the schools can increase our points by 9 points. And even family support, presence of family support, a boosting of 13 points in math. So there are quite a lot of things for us to explore, and we're very thankful that we have our CSO and NGO plus developmental partners in making that happen. So now we have the feedback of those that we're working with on the international scale, business sector, private sector, even NGOs and CSOs. But it might be important for us now to ask the question pertaining to what's happening internally. So I'd love to shift gears and ask our dear friends from within the DepEd family, what specific initiatives in the department that we are currently implementing that we think can effectively address the issues resulting in poor learning outcomes and ensure that students meet or even exceed the expected competencies at their levels. And I believe it is quite significant for us to highlight that probably one of the best persons to answer this is the former NCR Regional Director. Again, NCR having exhibited the highest score improvements and the largest number of students who reached the minimum proficiency across the board. And now, Yusek of HROD, Yusek Willie Cabral. Sir, for your thoughts and feedback.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, I'd like to thank the EXICOM of the previous administration for braving reopening of schools as early as 2021. And the lesson that we learned from that reopening of schools is actually being complemented, repeated right now. We don't have any suspension of classes right now because schools, parents, teachers are able now to shift to distance, whether asynchronous or distance learning in whatever modality. And that is some of the initiatives that we were able to replicate and implement. But in terms of learning and well-being, while we understand that this is twofold for both the teachers and the learners, we are currently looking at policy directions of ensuring that teachers, for their well-being, to be focused on the core mandates of what they are doing. And that's why we are at the start of removing those non-teaching tasks being assigned to them and looking at ways in which our learners can be provided with services just like that of the guidance counselors. And in fact, we have initial discussions with the Civil Service Commission looking at how we can fill up the remaining 81% of unfilled guidance counselors that can be filled out to our schools. And hopefully, it will also gain traction from the perspective of the Philippine Regulatory Commission so that by then, all our learners will be provided adequate mental health support for their learning. While we do understand that there are some equity issues with respect to access to gadgets and other, but the resilience of our teachers doing their best to provide the necessary support for type of learners that they have, I think all of those are necessary. Part of which is we recognize the effort of our teachers. That's why the career progression is now being laid on to provide more career path for our teachers and even providing them opportunities to choose the career line that they would like to pursue while in the department.
Thank you very much, Yusek Willie. So quite a lot of interventions and reforms currently happening within the DepEd family. And as mentioned, we are exploring interventions on mental health, removal of ancillary tasks, even the school-based feeding program has been expanded, and additional support for both teaching and non-teaching personnel, among others. And it's quite important for us probably now to look into how this is perceived and probably to get the insights of those that are at the forefront of these changes and interventions. So we're very thankful that today we have a representative of such a group, which is, of course, our master teacher, Sir Edgar Durana. Any thoughts, sir, with regard to the policy and practice directions that we can explore, particularly in terms of the department's initiatives to improve learner well-being and performance?
Actually, nakita po natin yung scores kanina, no? Medyo mababa, no? Pero as a teacher po talaga, hindi ako nalungkot, no? But nakikita ko yung my burning desire lalo to do my part as a teacher, no? So ang naiisip ko dito, kung ang DepEd Central Office ay they are making meaningful projects, okay, ganito, down to regional, then division sa school level. Siguro, on my part, siguro, I need to think of another meaningful project din. Ano? Hindi ko na kailangan hintayin pa yung binibigay ng, sa akin na mismo, gagawa na ako. For example, kung nakikita ko na there is a need for the continuing professional development, ano, instead, kasi naman sa magantay ako ng mga training ng Central Office, why not coming up with a project of empowering my co-teachers as a master teacher? For example, sa field ko sa school, I think of Project E-Cart, empowering and capacitating receiving teachers. Ang target nito, kung ito ang nakikita natin may problema sa learning competency, why not na palakasin natin yung teachers muna, yung competency ng mga teachers, yung skills na para maging well-equipped siya. So naging target ay nag-create ako ng LAC session guide. And from that, yung LAC session guide na yon, that is action research based po, na-implement siya. And from that, nagkaroon ng empowerment ng mga teachers. Ano? So in that case, nandun dapat yung desire ng teacher, ano? Hindi maging katuwang as a part of the solving the problem na nag-exist. So I think yun po, ano, kailangan ay gumawa rin kami ng parte sa amin sa edge ng sa part namin as a teacher po.
Thank you very much, sir. So it's quite clear that teachers play a very pivotal role in terms of addressing challenges in education. In fact, that was manifested by the results of PISA, showing that teachers, the support of teachers actually contributed a significant portion of the perception of learners in their capacity to perform well. And it's also quite evident that teachers held the line in terms of providing that support. Plus, the fact that we can improve them further gives us an opportunity to bolster the education sector as a whole. So from that perspective, it might be urgent for us to now explore what policy recommendations we can look into both at the national and local level to address all of these factors that were presented earlier, to address the need to improve student performance. And perhaps we can begin again with Yusek Dads with regard to that approach. Because Sir has the vantage point of SIMEO and also having a background in DepEd. So, Sir, what do you believe can be policy recommendations or probably program proposals that we can explore?
I would like to first mention that the practice now and the stand of VP Sara that we have to protect the teaching learning time at all costs, that has to be sustained. I really believe, I think my team, previous team knows this very well. We propose a 10-week quarter for the school years and 9 weeks to be devoted to teaching learning with no disruptions. The 10th week for assessment and other activities, and then all other co-curricular activities be done outside of the class time. I think if we do that, we will make sure that everybody is on task. That's not a recommendation. That's already being done. I support that. I love to see that continued and sustained. Of course, from the perspective of CMU Innotech, we're actually currently doing a research on the pedagogical approaches that are mandated by law. I call it R2Is, 2Cs, the reflective, inquiry-based, integrative, constructivist, and collaborative pedagogy. I think if we are effective in making sure that all the teachers in the schools of the country are able to demonstrate a pedagogy, a learning experience for the children characterized by those pedagogy, the questions being asked at PISA and other international large-scale assessments would be easily addressed by the learners because they go through a pedagogy that is very relevant to the needs of the 21st century learners. We are doing a research on that. We're about to report the findings to the Office of Music GINA very soon. There's also an ongoing project on supporting our parents and children relative to online behavior, child abuse, online bullying, etc. We have that project as well at CMU Innotech, and we're collaborating with an office here at the Department of Education relative to that. In addition, the Innotech is also undertaking a research on technology-enabled early grades reading intervention because I believe that if we are successful in creating children who are able readers, we will not have problems with learning outcomes later on. So those are my thoughts and the things that I'm actually engaged in now. But I have to also add that we have to intensify the push for real school-based management. There's one research project I am personally doing right now on how we can make sure that the schools are focusing on learning and futures-oriented as they manage the operations of the schools. Because I think it's a general view of many principals that there are other things they pay attention to other than learning that make them effective principals. But we have to change that view because I feel that until everyone in the Department of Education focuses on learning, we will not also create good results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yusek. That's quite reassuring to have the support of CMU Innotech and to have all of these researches and data generation happening right now. And it's also good to highlight the emphasis on the maintenance of teaching and learning time and the actual implementation of effective school-based management, things that we will definitely be exploring moving forward. And again, for context, the PISA 2022 was conducted at the early part of 2022, even before we went back to face-to-face classes. So it's actually quite opportune for us to now look into it with all of these new policy proposals, plus the current DepEd initiatives. We can hopefully see some impact already within the next few years. But again, reforms take time. And in that note, we'd love to know what recommendations our private sector partners may have with regard to ways to improve learner well-being. So I'd like to call on our friends from PBED. Yes, Ma'am Justine Raga.
Thanks, Asek. So I think when Sir Edgar and Yusek Dads talked about teachers and the importance of teachers and actually principals, school leaders as well, that's really one of the things that we need to continue to push for. We need to make sure that we support teachers. We need to make sure that training pre-service is really aligned with what's needed in the classroom, considering that the population of students will continue to grow. I really liked what Sir Edgar actually shared himself as a teacher na parang, ito yung gagawin ko as a teacher, and we kind of wish that the hundreds of thousands of other teachers are also capacitated and are also empowered to make the same decisions. And that really comes from the top, right? Like the empowerment comes from the leadership in the central office. Also, in terms of school principals, so that's also really important to make sure that they focus on learning. Of course, support the teachers. Many teachers do say that they're not able to focus on learning because of the many other tasks, and it's good that the Department of Education has made pronouncements on increasing administrative support. We do hope to see continuous hiring of those administrative officers. I guess second would be, what's important is also making sure that resources reach students, that our students hopefully in the near future no longer have to share books and go learn in classrooms that are classrooms that are well appointed and are fixed and are well. But that also means resources, and to which Senator Win mentioned earlier, we must pour in resources into the education system. But I guess it's also a function of making sure that these resources go into the right reforms. And while DepEd does have a list of things that you are already prioritizing, I guess it's good that we know that we're prioritizing where the resources should go. Just to add, I'd really like to kind of look at investments, right? And it's not really saying that money will solve the problem. It's the right use of money. So like Vietnam, for example, in terms of expenditure, it's very similar to the Philippines, but then they really do well in maths and everything else. Maybe just two last things. So the issue of bullying and the issue of our kids feeling alone, and I think that was a function of, because this test was done prior to the face-to-face classes, we really also need an honest-to-goodness kind of debriefing or helping our kids make sense of the last 3 years. And aside from that being part of the teacher's role, we need more guidance counselors in schools. And we have a shortage of that. There are also challenges in the way we hire guidance counselors, in the credentials that's needed. And I think so we need to rethink that. And then the last thing would be specific to hunger and malnutrition. So that's something we also really need to focus on. And DepEd has expanded its school-based feeding program. But we have to remember that nutrition is not only the task of DepEd. DepEd only starts looking at nutrition once the students come to the classrooms. But what about the first 5 years? And what about the agencies that are looking at the first 1,000 days? And when students are in the early childhood development centers, they have to be all aligned so that our kids, our learners, don't fall through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that's great to hear from our partners from the private sector, highlighting the need for effective investment and management of resources, and at the same time, also expanding the vantage point towards learner support. And we're very thankful that we have our partners here today, such as Senator Win Gatchalian, really championing legislative measures to improve such as mental health, improving school-based feeding program, among others, because all of these are contributory. And
sorry, Asek Dex, just to add, because everything I've said is kind of prescriptive, or like this is what we think, but maybe just to add that the private sector is here. So another thing is, how do we consolidate everyone who is in this room who is willing to help? And we in the private sector stand by the government and the Department of Education in this effort.
Thank you very much, Ma'am. Clearly, a whole-of-nation approach is needed. And as such, of course, we cannot forget our dear partners from our NGO and CSO allies. So I'd like to call on our dear friend, Sir Xerxes de Castro, from the vantage point of Save the Children.
Thank you, Asek Dexter. Siguro I'll briefly talk about 3 things. So unang-una yung increasing instructional time. I think we've been hearing that a lot since we're recovering from the pandemic, addressing the learning loss and so on. But are we giving quality instructional remedial opportunities for learners? Medyo striking na may report na 40% of those who took the test are feeling bored in school. So what do we do about that? I think what's important is we use the statistics to not really dictate, but to inform our decisions inside the classroom. Classroom management is also an issue or a concern mentioned earlier. So are we giving quality instruction not just, extending our class hours and so on. So I think that's important. I mentioned about using statistics. Kanina may nabanggit din na they make friends easily, 83%. So what can we use that for? So maybe peer tutoring could be done, and what leverage can we do to make sense of these statistics? In terms of child protection, bullying is really an important matter to resolve. We have 43% of girls reporting that they are being bullied, and 53, that's a big number, almost half. So how do we deal with that? Do we have child protection mechanisms? We know, I know we have a child protection policy within the department, but is it understood and being implemented in schools that well? Because by our reports in the field, there are cases that are not being reported, and teachers may not even be aware how to address them or how to recognize that bullying and child protection issues are happening. May mga political issues then. So, for example, teachers are, afraid to report cases for some political or for some religious reasons, cultural reasons. So that's another important area to look on. Lastly, child participation. So you might be hearing Save the Children always talking about child participation, because we believe that we cannot fully grasp the extent or what I feel as a child. It's only themselves that they truly understand what's happening, what they want for them. So if you're talking about increasing instructional time, or making the lessons lively or enjoyable, so you don't decide on your own, right, as a teacher, but you make decisions with the inputs of the learners. So you ask them, you make them participate, not just in everyday lessons, but also in school governance. I understand we have the government councils, but are we doing enough? Are we, integrating that enough to our systems? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think that's quite important to highlight as well, that there are many opportunities for us to work with CSOs and NGO partners to address such concerns that we might need bolstering in. And probably to help encapsulate this entire discussion and to move forward, probably for a last question directed to our members of the DepEd family, very briefly, what steps can we take to ensure continuous improvement in the learning outcomes of Filipino students in future PISA assessments? First, from the perspective of our administrators and our frontline teachers. Yusek Weed.
First and foremost, there are factors relating to classroom management, ideal classroom ratio, and so on. We studied the enrollment of 2022 and 2023 and found out that the greater majority of classes organized in that year actually fall within standards and even below standards of the ideal classroom ratio that the department is currently doing. So we need to focus on those schools with class size more than what is prescribed, and deploy the needed human resource to those teachers, and even come up with a policy designing and defining the distribution and deployment of teachers to where it is needed, and build also the capacity of our teachers, providing more opportunities for learning and development, particularly making it sort of simulating the actual assessment for their learners, looking at how to really understand test construction perspective, how to analyze and utilize test results from their level. We have done that in NCR. In fact, we have organized already about 160 teacher assessor doing and constructing their own assessment for the schools, and even utilizing it as a database for that. Aside from those, we recognize that managing a small class size and making them attending to the individual needs of the learners, I think with the increased instructional time and reducing other tasks that are not inherent to normal teaching duties, then probably we can put forward our best foot so that learning outcomes can really have a 360-degree for improvement.
Thank you very much, Yusek Willie. So really people driving the change. It's about people distribution, people enhancement. And of course, to probably close this discussion, very briefly, sir, what recommendations and steps do you think we have to take in order to improve the performance of our learners in the next PISA?
Probably aside from the continuing professional development for the teachers, siguro as part sa naming mga teacher, it is very important to create yung school climate and support. Kasi ang pinaka nakikita kong root dito, yung pinaka ugat ay yun talaga yung attitude ng bata doon sa pag-aaral. So why not kami mga guro, I'm encouraging yung mga kasamahan kong guro na tayo mismo magkaroon tayo ng yung suporta natin sa bata hindi nawawala. So yung inclusivity ba? Okay, we have to consider that. So kailangan pagpasok natin sa classroom, kailangan lagi tayong handa. At ang laging target natin kung paano uuwi ang ating mga estudyante na masaya at maraming kwento na nababanggitin sa kanilang magulang. Kapag iyon ang naging diskarte natin mga guro, ayun ang naging motivation natin, lahat magiging maganda eh. Papasok ang mga bata, magiging maganda ang kanilang performance sa pag-aaral. So lahat, sunod-sunod na yun eh. At the same time, it is very important also aside from creating inclusive, yung mapil nila yung love, yung welcome dun sa paaralan, yung involvement ng mga magulang, pati ng mission partners, As a teacher siguro, hindi namin dapat sarilinin yung responsibilidad in educating, We need to tap yung mga magulang na sila mismo ang mission partners, sila ang mismo ang kaagapay namin para turuan ng mga batang to. Not only the parents, but yung mga other stakeholders din. Now, siguro paanong paraan? Siguro kapag may mga regular school activities, o may school activities ang mga paaralan, we need to open it sa lahat to actively engage, para makita nila yung sistema, makita nila yung data. Kailangan pala ng suporta natin bilang stakeholders para ma-improve yung quality ng education ng mga bata. So I think yun yun po yung nakikita ko po. Thank you po.
Thank you very much. So clearly, what I think we have gotten from this very robust discussion is that education is everyone's business. And we're all after the same thing, creating the most opportune climate to learn and become more resilient Filipinos, more resilient learners. So once again, we'd like to thank all of our panelists. Let's all give them a round of applause. So again, once again, I'm Asik Dexter Galban, mulit-muli para sa Bansang Makabata at Batang Makabansa. Thank you very much, and we look forward to having you for the next panel.
That concludes our first set of panel discussion. It was such an insightful discussion from our panel discussants. Once again, thank you, Yusek Cabral, Dr. San Antonio, Mr. De Castro, Ms. Raagas, Teacher Durana, and of course, the moderator, Assistant Secretary Galban. The next panel discussion will focus on the crucial investments for education success, covering financial, human, material, and time resources related to student performance, well-being, and equity in education. Joining us in this discussion are Undersecretary and Chief of Staff, Michael Wesley Paula, Dr. Carol Markey, the Executive Director of the 2nd Congressional Commission on Education, Dr. Michael Ralph Abrigo, Senior Research Fellow of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, Dr. Jenny Hoxon, the Vice President for Academics of the Philippine Normal University, and Dr. Carmela C. Oracion, the Managing Director of the Ateneo Center for Educational Development. Moderating this discussion is Dr. Jerome E. Buenviaje, the Dean of the UP College of Education.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be moderating this forum for the PISA 2022. I'm Jerome, and I'm the Dean of the UP College of Education. Before the formal event started, meron na kaming mga forum na ginawa. At ang sabi nga namin, kung nirecord lang natin yung kwentuhan natin kanina, yun din ang sasabihin natin. So, at ang kinukulit nila sa akin ay huwag naman ganun ka-formal. Yung bang ganito, have the PISA data, so what do we do about it in terms of investment of education? And then, how do we tap collaboration beyond ourselves? No? Yung mga tao na kailangan kasama natin. And lastly, what would be our recommendations in terms of student performance, yung nabanggit kanina, well-being, and of course, equity. Yan. And because I received this only yesterday, I made my own rule. And since I'm the moderator, susunod kayo, di ba? So, I determined some people, hinanap ko yung kabagayan ng issue doon sa inyong mga posisyon ngayon. So, I predetermined what particular question I will be throwing up to you. And then, I'm asking you to please give us 2 to 3 minute maximum response, no? So, dahil 30 minutes lang ang ating discussion. Yan. Okay, so let's begin with the first question. And as mentioned, our first question is on general priorities in education in terms of investment. So, alam natin, napakaraming priorities, no? Yung priorities nga parang general list of priorities. However, which do you think are the programs or aspect that we need to really prioritize that will yield to high impact in the education system? At this moment, I'll be asking Yusek Powa first and Dr. Carol Yee, kasi siya po ang ating director ng EDCOM 2. So, mukhang marami namang naluluto na. So, silang una nating tatanungin, but of course, other members are free to add on to the discussion. Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Well, yung direction naman talaga ng DepEd, talagang nailatag na natin dun sa matatag agenda. Basically, those will be the priorities of this administration, of course, the Marcos administration, and led by the Secretary of Education, or Vice President Sara Duterte. So, yung matatag agenda, if you can see, kasi parati pong natatanong yan sa akin din, no, kahit sa ibang interviews, ano yung kailangan mo i-prioritize? Or ano yung top priority ng DepEd sa ngayon? But if you look at it, really has to be a holistic approach. That's why in the Matatag agenda, we look at the curriculum, which we already did. No, na-roll out na natin yung Matatag curriculum. Although yung senior high school is still being reviewed, I think the deadline is around May 2024. So that's one, the curriculum. Second would be obviously infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, hindi lang naman yan classrooms, no? Hindi lang yan school facilities. We're also talking about digital infrastructure. We are set to roll out yung ating tinatawag na DepEd, DigiEd, Digital Education 2028. So yan yung isang priority area din natin. And of course, learners' well-being. School-based feeding program, may isang programa na gusto talaga nating paigtingin. As you've seen in the presentation of Yusek Gina, nutrition directly affects the performance of our learners, directly affects learning outcomes. And of course, our teachers. So, nandyan yung dalawa, teaching quality and teacher welfare. We have the TEC, which we think will be very helpful, na mentioned din po ni Senator Win earlier, in terms of teaching quality, not just sa pre-service pa lang, no? And then of course, in-service trainings. So these are the facets that we think are very important, the 4 major facets in the Matatag agenda, which we are working hard on. We've started already. So this year, if you're asking me something directly related to PISA, National Learning Recovery Program, we started with the learning camp. We are awaiting now the results and the analysis of the learning camp to see if there are tweaks we can do. But we are also about to launch yung reading program, math program, science program, of course, catch-up Fridays. So basically, in a nutshell, kung titingnan niyo yung matatag agenda, dyan na talaga yung tutok natin. Hindi na tayo iiwas pa o pupunta pa sa iba kasi mawawala lang tayo ng focus. So right now, we're all just focused on doing and delivering what's in the matatag agenda.
Yan, thank you. And anchoring on these priorities, are these things being discussed and focused on sa EDCOM?
Yes, I think marami dito actually EDCOM members. So kasama namin sila sa lahat ng discussions. And in fact, yesterday, we were together and brainstorming about a lot of these problems. I have 3 buckets. Siguro the first one is we have to acknowledge and recognize the effort of the national government in increasing expenditures in education. Yung investments natin per student has tripled from 2009 to 2022. So malaki talaga yung increases ng paggastos natin sa bawat bata. Yung datos na pinakita sa atin was cumulative spending for each child, for each learner. And that is different, no? Because overall, we are still spending much lower. So it means, one, we need more resources, yes. Pero mahalaga din na, one, it is spent. And second, when it is spent. And third, who spends it. I think yung una doon, yes, kailangan natin magdagdag ng resources. Sa ikalawa, when it is spent, I think most of our resources are invested in higher levels of education. Tulad na nabanggit kanina at lumabas din sa datos, early childhood education and nutrition is so important. But it is an area that we are still less invested in terms of early stimulation from 0 to 2 and early childhood education from 3 to 4. And then during those periods, nutrition, especially in the first 1,000 days. Kailangan maigting yung pag-i-invest natin ng resources kasi kung hindi mo maresolusyonan ang stunting sa panahon na yon, you can't reverse it later on. Even nutritionally at-risk mothers, mga ina na nagbubuntis, na malnourished, pag nanganak, stunted na yung bata. And that is irreversible, and that has significant consequences on the child in terms of the learning. So mahalaga nating tingnan yon. In terms of the urgent investments of DepEd, I think it's on the right track, the National Learning Recovery Program. We just have to make sure that it's meeting or hitting the right learners that actually need it the most, yung mga dapat nasa remediation, yung tamang grade level, especially Key Stage 1, na hindi sila nagpo-progress beyond grade 3 without being numerate and literate, and also following the fundamentals of TARL. And ano yun? Kailangan natin ng assessment to know where our learners are, kailangan dynamic yung grouping, at tapos kailangan natututukan with the right interventions that is custom fit to the needs of that specific learner. Yun yung second bucket. Yung third bucket, I think nabanggit din niya, and uulitin ko lang, early childhood education and nutrition, at yung ikalawa, yung teacher quality. Yung teacher quality, and silang dalawa are members of our subcommittee on teacher education and development, tatlong mahalagang aspeto. Sinasabi ng teachers in our consultations, "Sir, please help us teach. All we want to do is teach. But that's the last thing we are able to do." Sabi ko, grabe naman. Sabi ko, kasi yun yung question ko as we ended our FGD. Sabi ko, kung may isang wish kayo na pwedeng magawa ng EDCOM para sa inyo, sabi niya, please help us teach. We just want to teach. Pero ang dami-dami naming ibang trabaho. And pag inaral natin, and we know and we respect the ongoing partnership between DepEd and DBM, may promise in terms of the AO3 positions that will be increased annually. Pero pag inaral mo siya, yung clusters na tutugunan niya, maliit pa rin na porsyento ng 50 na nasa inventory ng DepEd na talagang kailangan pa nating hanapan ng creative solutions for. For example, DRRM, 4-piece coordinator, school-based feeding program, gulayan sa paaralan, napakaraming responsibilities. Sabi ko nga, nung ginawa yung teacher education curriculum, dapat pala naglagay tayo ng elective sa BMI, computing BMI. May agriculture elective para sa paggugulayan sa paaralan. Kasi ang dami nilang tasks. And that we really need to address that because teachers need to teach and you cannot assume that as long as they're in school, that's instructional time because that's not the case. The second issue is the PSGs of CHED. Kailangan tugunan niya yung talagang pangangailangan at realidad ng mga teachers pagpasok nila sa public schools. I think didikit yon sa hiring policies of DepEd. And ito ihirit ko sa DepEd. In our conversation sa ground, sinasabi ng teachers, "Sir, how can we teach properly?" Ang inaral ko po, Filipino. Ang pinapaturo sa akin, math. 10 years na po ako nagtuturo ng math. Hindi ko po talaga yun expertise. Hindi yun yung pinag-aralan ko. But if you look at the PSGs of CHED, It's Bachelor of Elementary Education. It assumes that you can be, ano ba yun, yung self-contained classroom, but that is true for kinder to grade 3. But grade 4 upwards, it should be different, diba? And how do we make that happen so that we are really able to provide the content knowledge that the children need, because that's what they require to meet all of these competency requirements. Tapos, yung third is yung teacher training. A lot of challenges in teacher training. Pagdating namin sa ground, sinasabi ng mga teachers, "Sir, ang hirap kasi 300 kami sa school. Ang slot na ibibigay sa amin, 3. Tapos pag nag-skating model sa amin, half day. Kailangan ma-absorb namin lahat. Hindi namin kaya. Please help us access teacher training programs that are of quality." So, yung mga yun siguro, bilang simula.
Yeah. Thank you, Yusek, and parang lahat na covered na niya. Pero anyways, if you follow the points discussed, what they're saying in short is that we have to be strategic. Yun lang naman yung sinasabi, bottom line. We have to be strategic. Kaya ang aking susunod na tanong, now that we have this data from PISA, how can we be further strategic using this data for informed decision making? Yan. So tatanungin ko na itong mga nasa TEIs at syempre ang ating partner sa PIBED. Yes. PIDS, sorry. Nandito, tabi ko si Speeds, yes.
Good morning po. Hello, Dean Jerome. First, I'd like to state that I'm happy to be in this mini reunion of people who did not have to listen to the presentation a while ago to be agitated and forced to action, no? And continue to work on the pursuits that we have embarked on. And in connection with what have already been stated, I would also like to say that in a context where many things could have been done yesterday, then there are really numerous priorities and we know them. Pagkaupo nga po ni Ma'am Gina kanina, sabi niya, alam na naman natin lahat to, di ba? Alam na natin yung gagawin. And we do. I'd like to echo what have been stated a while ago. I think the learning recovery program is important. Nandiyan na. Okay? Second, nutrition. No? Nutrition programs, as well as the interventions that can address hunger. Kasi dalawa rin sila, di ba? Nutrition and hunger. And finally, teaching and learning resources, beginning with infrastructure, physical classrooms and IT, but as well as equipment also for the different subject areas. So, palagay ko itong tatlo, no? But maybe later on, I'll have the chance to say, how now, no? And what then? But these three have been prioritized and they are clear in various documents. So later I will continue.
Yeah. Thank you. And Dr. Jenny?
Ako muna, sir. So dahil tinapos naman na po ni Chief at saka ni Carol ang lahat-lahat, i-echo ko na rin lang. Ang space po namin sa Philippine Normal University is the pre-service teacher education. Time and again, tinanggap naman natin at tinatanggap natin that the single most important focus in education on quality are the teachers. And so we focus our efforts, we continue to focus our efforts on teachers, and we don't forget that the teacher quality and teaching quality begins in the pre-service. So critical na ang teacher training institutions, as also mentioned by the Vice President kanina sa kanyang mensahe, should align our focus not to that of the Department of Education, because too late na pag kinapture pa natin yung quality while they are in the in-service. So the pre-service is a very potent solution to everything that we are experiencing, and that's long-term visioning. The second point na i-echo ko sa sinabi ni Carol is that the PSGs, no, yung curriculum namin sa teacher training institution is to focus on the knowing, on the what to teach. But the PISA result gave us so many considerations on bullying, so many considerations on boredom, so many considerations on I don't feel safe, no? So are our teachers prepared to assist our students that way, no? Are our teachers prepared to encapsulate all of these things inside the classroom in the teaching learning perspective? There's also that particular component of the math teacher na ang tagal-tagal niyang magturo kasi sinasaway niya muna ang estudyante. So classroom management ba yun? O is that a matter of kailangan na ituro agad natin at the beginning, at first 5 minutes of the lesson, sinabi na niya what the lesson is about, no? Pero tinuturuan tayo ng ibang pang mga bagay-bagay towards the classroom na baka nasasayang ang teaching-learning processes. The third point na gusto kong sabihin ay, the teachers, they come to the classroom with that love for teaching and learning, and that love for students. We've sometimes failed them in the system. We sometimes do not give them that adequate support, that too much work, as they said, and that their professional development are not aligned to what they need. So those are critical components, and again, the focus is on teaching, teacher quality so that they can teach better.
Yan. And lalabas tayo sa teacher education perspective. Ano sa tingin nyo? Ano yung mga data na dapat bigyan tuon? At paano ito i-translate into informed decision making?
But before I answer that, I just want to congratulate everyone. We should pat our back na despite the long lockdown, despite the COVID-19, we are able to maintain yung ating standing. Of course, there's still room for improvement. There's a lot more to be desired. But I guess because we have these investments 10 years prior, 20 years prior, doon sa presentation ng Sakina kanina, pinakita niya na if you have pre-primary education, 26 points higher with our K-12. So, and we have these investments. Siguro marami lang sinabing mga ideas kanina. I think bilang isang ekonomista, pwede kong isama dito is that we should put costs dun sa mga investments na to, sa mga initiatives na to. Alin ba dito yung pinakamura pero pinakamalaki yung impact? So kailangan natin mamili. I'm very happy na sinabi ni Senator kanina na we are pouring a lot of money and we want to pour a lot of money, pero saan tayo makakakuha ng pinakamalaking impact sa mga pera natin? And for that we need data. So and I'm very happy that we have PISA 2018, we have PISA 2022. I hope we have more and that we can combine other sources of data from DepEd. We have a lot of information from DepEd, and we can utilize this to inform policy, identify these interventions at work.
Yan. And of course, kanina din sa ating discussion, nabanggit yung the spirit of bayanihan, which is very important kasi nga, ang edukasyon ay hindi lang business ng DepEd. So, ibabangga na natin ito doon sa, kung alam na natin ang priorities natin and the data is informing us, who are the actors? So, how do we collaborate now? Okay? And this is open to anyone. Paano ang tamang collaboration? Kasi kanina, di ba, umaga, nagkikwentuhan tayo, parang lahat naman tayo pagod at may ginagawa. Pero minsan, parang hindi tayo sabay-sabay ng gustong patunguhan. So how do we collaborate so that we are strategic in interpreting the data and as well, the actors are very well aligned to that strategy? Anybody? Or maybe you want to go first? Yeah.
Earlier, we said that, you know, the information presented to us is not really new, diba? And I don't think that the information should be used to point fingers. So in terms of your question on who is responsible for this, all of us, diba? And I think ito, Senator, who mentioned a while ago that when the pandemic came, diba, we brought together all our resources, material and human, to address the situation. So ako po palagay ko, itong presentation na ito should also bring us to giggle mode. I don't know how to translate that in English, but giggle. Passion lang ba? Basta giggle mode, no, to implement, no, the action steps. I don't think we should go back to the discussion table and begin analyzing again, and then paralyzing again, and then wait for the next PISA round. Diba? So I think we should really act. However, I think we should begin acting in a more consolidated, organized, and orchestrated manner. Diba? So much good is happening. There's so much goodness from the different groups that are contributing. Pero we also maybe need a game plan, no? A well-formulated game plan at this point. And some kind of gatekeeping and gatekeepers so that we can also say na, okay, ito po yung ginagawa ninyo, pero kaya rin nyo po naman ito, pwede bang ganito, no? So, in that manner, I think, no, if we will begin working according to a game plan without, of course, ignoring the strengths, no, of the different contributors, and without dictating, no, what people should do, no, keeping their missions pa rin, I think we should be able to make a difference. So, and then that game plan can include both responsibilities on the part of the key players as well as accountability. So maybe we will get somewhere.
Sino na ang gigil?
Ang kapwa gigil. Seatmates kasi kami, 2 araw na. So nag-rub off yung gigil niya sa akin. I think 2 things that we've been discussing also internally, kami ni Dr. Mel and also with some of our colleagues in the sector, ang dami-dami kasing lumalapit na, what can we do? We understand now the situation. How can we help? What can we do? And 2 things that are low-hanging fruits, yung nutrition talaga sa 0 to 4, yung mga nanay na malnourished, tulungan. Kasi kahit magpakain tayo na magpakain hanggang high school, kung yung early years, malnourished sila, talagang malaking problema. So sabi ko nga, pupunta na ako sa CBCP, pupunta na ako sa mga association of foundations. Please help us with the nutrition needs of the early years. And the other one is a lot of schools have also approached us and mga universities. What can we do about the learning crisis or about the National Learning Recovery Program? And they want to help. Sabi nila, what if we adopt a school? We can help tutor children. We can help support them in terms of remediation or training interventions for the teachers. So may mga ganong paraan. I think ang mahalagang role ng DepEd, direct us on where we should go. Parang saan ba yung pinakamaigting ang pangangailangan pagdating sa nutrition or pagdating sa learning crisis or sa learning gap para kung saan pupunta yung resources, doon talaga pinakakailangan. So, yun yung mahalaga siguro para may direction yung mga willing stakeholders and lahat tayo maghahati-hati.
Yeah. Ayun. Last one siguro from among...
Yeah, just to react na lang to yung mga nasabi because I totally agree with them. In fact, kanina kami ni Ma'am Oracion, we were having a small conversation right just there in the corner exactly about yung parang ang dami kasing gustong tumulong and kahit kami sa DepEd nakikita namin and every day people would write to us, call us, approach us kung paano sila makakatulong at syempre overwhelming yung support and we're very happy about that but napansin din namin even when we started here sa DepEd na watak-watak yung mga efforts and that's why we started dun sa partnership at least meron kaming portal na ginawa so that we can actually direct partners kung saan kayo maglalagay ng interventions. And very transparent tayo doon. Nilalagay natin ano yung kailangan ng school, ano yung kailangan ng area na yon, at anong pinaka-effective na intervention na may bibigay ng partners. But when I was talking to Ma'am Oracion, because that's a start, but I realized, I was telling her kanina, meron tayong Educ Forum no, dito sa DepEd, which was started even by the previous admin. And I think that could also be a good venue for all the partners to sit down, really find out and come up with one direction para yung efforts natin harmonize siya. Isang direction lang tayo, hindi yung watak-watak, which is the same idea behind the National Reading Program. No? Because napansin namin na iba-ibang regions, iba-ibang divisions, may kani-kanilang program. So to be able to make it effective, we tried to look at the best practices and come up with a uniform program. I think the same idea will apply when it comes to partnerships and interventions. It's something we can do and we commit to already start doing that with the Educ Forum and of course with our partnership portal. Thank you.
Ayan. And because we do not have the rest of the day to discuss this, ganito ang gagawin natin, no? We will be coming up with our closing statement, but this time focused on so, given all these things and issues and ideas, so what are your policy and practice recommendations? Tumuhog na kayo ng isa. Let's say, for example, in terms of partnership, so what can we do? No? So, mag-focus na kayo sa, yan, checking on these notes. Yan. So, and I will be starting from the person on my left.
Thank you. Ako siguro, madami na silang sasabihin sa policy, but we have existing policies. We have existing reforms na hindi pa tumatakbo. The Teacher Education Council is one, at invested ang maraming tao doon, at invested ang maraming organizations doon. So siguro, to make it work is urgent for us so that it could help EDCOM, it could help DepEd, it could help all the agencies. So I think yun.
Oo, sabi ko kasi we have 28 priorities in EDCOM. So, babanggitin ko lahat. Hindi. I think kailangan din nating, we're talking about resources here, di ba? We looked at the data, and if you total the underutilized or unobligated budget of the 3 education agencies last year, it's at 35 billion. Yung unutilized among SEF, 15 billion. Pag kinumbine mo yun, 50 billion sanang nagastos natin pa para makatulong sa iba't ibang efforts natin na sobrang laki ng pangangailangan. So, siguro paigtingin pa kung paano natin gagamitin yun sa mga mas mahalagang bagay na talagang umuusad. Yung mga bagay na alam naman natin historically problematic talaga, let's find adaptive solutions. For example, textbooks. We know for a fact that production of textbooks will take at least 1 year. 6 months for development, 3 months for printing, 3 months for publication. And I know all of this because of our close discussions with all of the offices here. Actually, naisa-isa na namin yung mga partners here in DepEd, and we thank them for their continued patience and enthusiasm in helping us with the work. So, anong plan B? Kasi pag nag-K147 next year, kung hindi talaga darating yung textbook sa day 1, how can we find solutions to it and what alternatives are there? For example, si Dr. Mel and Father Ben have long worked on teaching guides, and that has been seen to be effective in really supporting the teachers and improving learner outcomes. Can we consider that as a temporary plan B? Tapos pagdating sa congestion na talagang malalim pangailangan and malaking resources, we check the data also, and there are many junior high schools that are severely congested. But if you look at the municipality that they're in, wala or iisa ang ESC school. So why can't we use the existing resources and target it better to resolve the challenges that we are facing also in relation to congestion? So yes, more resources, but let's do what we can to make better use of what is already with us and learn from our own experience. Yun lang.
Salamat.
Well, for me, we need to be a learning society. Yung DepEd, yung mga schools natin, is a good laboratory. Marami tayong interventions. We need to test ano ba yung impact ng mga maliliit na ginagawa natin, and we can come up with ano ba yung best dito, ano yung pinakamaganda. And then partner that, kasi lahat tayo, marami tayong magandang mga naiisip kanina, marami na silang nasabi. So we need to test that out, and then hopefully learn from that, and hopefully pumasok din sa pagtuturo ng mga teachers, so that when they become teachers, they'll be able to use it.
Thank you. I think we're okay on the big ideas and the strategies kasi talagang maganda naman sila, well-formulated and all. I would go for action planning in clear and specific terms. Unti lang po yung may tiyaga sa ganon, pero baka pwedeng tiyagaan because the more check marks that we're able to put, baka we can really make progress. I like the way that DepEd formulated that 4th question because it includes both policy and practice recommendations, no? And they should go side by side, but I feel that if we make improvements in practice and practices, that can also allow us to put the check marks and come up with better formulated policy recommendations.
Yeah, and finally, let's hear from DepEd.
That's actually very helpful, yung mga naging insights ng mga co-panelists and even the panel before us. No? So it's up to us to just focus on implementation. That's something we want to focus on because we do have the plan, but it's another matter when you talk about implementation. So dun lang kami, like when Carol here mentioned textbooks, procurement is definitely a cause of delay, and that's the cause of why utilization is not as good as we want it to be. So yan yung talagang pinagpo-focus natin. That's why we created the procurement strand just for that. So we've already had 1 year. To be honest, much to be desired. Marami pa rin tayong delays, and that's why we want to work on that next year. And then lastly, yung smart spending, di ba? Kasi nga, nabanggit din ni Carol kanina yung school infrastructure. As we all know, mayroon talaga tayong limitations sa national budget as a whole, not just with DepEd, no, as a whole. And so, we're also for yung expansion of the voucher program, for example. Kasi mas mabilis siya eh. Yung classroom, you have to think about the time it takes to procure, to build the classroom, and also the absorptive capacity of DPWH. Pero yung voucher, nandiyan na yan eh, readily available. So that's something we're looking at right now, ESC, joint delivery voucher, and of course a voucher for the senior high school program. So these are the things that we are working on, but again, it all boils down to implementation. So that is something we will really focus on.
Yeah, thank you so much, panelists. No, if I would summarize the thoughts that were conveyed this morning or this afternoon, no, sabi sa investment for education, we have to be strategic. And when we say strategic, three things that surface. Number one, in terms of our finances, because resources are scarce, we have to tap on our human resources and of course, make sure that our infrastructure, all our logistics are readily made available. At lahat ng ito, kahit hindi siya magiging strategic, kung hindi siya operationalized well, yung binanggit na monitoring on a daily basis, that will really yield to the best results. Maraming salamat po. Magandang umaga.
That ends our second panel discussion. It was such a worthwhile discussion. The insights our panel discussants have shared have certainly enriched our perspectives and provided solid inputs for the future directions of the department in addressing education issues in our country. Once again, thank you, Yusek Pawa, Dr. Yi, Dr. Abrigo, Dr. Hoxon, and Dr. Oracion, and of course, Dean Buenviaje. As we draw near the conclusion of this forum, let us all listen to Director Nelia V. Benito, the Director of the Bureau of Education Assessment, and concurrently the National Project Manager of PISA, as she delivers her closing message.
Fellow educators, developmental partners, civil society organization officers and members, officials from other government agencies, distinguished guests, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian and Congressman Romulo, deputy officials and staff, ladies and gentlemen. The Bureau of Education Assessment and the Education Research Division, which serve as the National Center for PISA 2022, would like to extend our deep appreciation for your presence and support in taking part of this important milestone in the education history. Your participation in this PISA 2022 National Forum and those who are joining us online is a clear manifestation that we are all united toward a common vision to provide quality education to every Filipino learner. Participating in international large-scale assessments like PISA has been a dauntless decision of the Education Department. But with this is its deep commitment towards globalizing the quality of basic education in the country. Considering the changing landscape in education, the global educational disruption, and the advancement of global standards, the department needs to have credible and reliable source of information to fully view existing gaps and areas for improvement in our education system. Hence, the strong drive to participate in the PISA 2022 and other international large-scale assessments despite the unprecedented challenges brought about by the pandemic. The PISA assessment is a reflection of our 15-year-old's cumulative years of learning. PISA also showed accumulative outcomes factors influenced by socio-economic conditions of students, their homes, and their communities, among others. With these educational concerns, improving the country's academic performance would require multi-sectoral or whole nation approach. The Department of Education cannot do it alone. We need your support. Today, we are all gathered here not only to know how we perform in PISA 2022, but to make a commitment. As education leaders, partners, and stakeholders, we need to closely collaborate to achieve education quality. The story doesn't conclude on the Philippines assessment results. What's important are the messages behind those numbers, the significant insights, and the things we need to do next. The wealth of information from the PISA findings will serve as substantial inputs in identifying areas for educational reforms and transformation. We need to maximize the use of PISA results of targeting meaningful developments in learning outcomes, teaching approaches, and resources. At this juncture, let me reiterate Her Excellency Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines and Secretary of Education, Sara Duterte's call to action that we stand together and act today tungo sa bansang makabata at matatag na edukasyon. Maraming salamat at magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Director Benito. As we move forward, let us carry with us the collective responsibility to transform the insights drawn from PISA into actionable strategies for the betterment of our education system. Each of us plays a vital role in shaping the future of our learners and the generations to come. Before we proceed to the press conference, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to our distinguished guests, Senator Sherwin T Gatchalian, Congressman Romanito T Romo, our panel discussants and moderators. Your presence has added immense value to our discussions. Our gratitude also extends to the various government officials, education stakeholders, partners, members of DepEd Executive Committee, DepEd Directors, chiefs, educators, academicians, researchers, members of the Forum Technical Team, and the PISA Technical Team, and our friends from the media who have contributed to the success of this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the National Forum on PISA 2022 Results of the Philippines. For an orderly exit, our marshals and ushers will be assisting you. Packed lunch is served on your way out. We will also be providing limited copies of the forum kit. You may also access the content of this kit by scanning the QR code flashed on the screen. The reporters can come forward for the press conference. Joining in the press conference are Yusek Poa, Yusek Gonong, and Director Benito. Thank you very much and have a good day. For an orderly press con, only the reporters can come forward.